Good morning, Mets fans, and welcome to a Thursday edition of Driving with Mr. Met. I am Mr. Met, and in an improbable finish to a really terrific World Series, the Washington Nationals have won the best of seven game series, find themselves as the champions of all of baseball. And I found myself choking back vomit last night as I watched them celebrate in Houston, wondering what the hell happened to the Astros, realizing that these sorts of things happen when teams get hot down the stretch and the best team loses in a short series. I'm going to talk a little bit about the World Series on today's show and sort of give a preview for what's next for Driving. I recorded a video yesterday, but I didn't get a chance to post it. It was one of those crazy days where I just didn't have any downtime to post the video. But what I was saying in yesterday's video was I said two things. One, I didn't think that the Astros should start Zach Greinke in Game 7, and two, umpiring has been atrocious in the World Series. And on brand to the latter point, the umpiring remained atrocious in the World Series. It's been a problem. Umpiring is a problem in baseball. It seems to be getting worse. The interference call from the night before, from Game 6 on Trey Turner, was probably the right call. That's the sad part about it. It probably was the correct interpretation of the rules. The problem with the rules of baseball is that they're very subjective. It's really not subjective. Sorry, there's an interpretation aspect that comes into play, and each umpire can interpret the rules a little bit differently. That's that gray area where you need a human to be able to determine these sorts of things. Where you have to be able to sort of situationally explain something or allow something or not allow something. That being said, though, umpires are doing themselves no favors to pushing back the move to robo-umps, which, the robo-ump thing is being tried now. It is certainly not without its flaws. We've seen some videos of that popping up online. I've seen a couple of different examples of videos where the umpire has to call the strike that's clearly not a strike. And what I said yesterday on the show that I didn't post was that I think that the evolution here needs to not be to replace umpires, but instead to use TrackMan or whatever radar-based system MLB decides to use for robo-umping and strikes and balls calling, have them sort of work in tandem with the human umpire. In other words, have the machine in the umpire's ear, but let the umpire make the call first. The umpire is seeing the pitch just like he normally would, making the call in his head, and then having the robo-ump verify or validate that call. And then if robo-ump is off, differs from what the umpire was going to call, then the ump can make a split-second decision to change his mind. So it's a work in progress. It's going to need to be changed. I will say this: it's very easy for us as fans to watch these games and have at our fingertips the super slow-mo, high-res, instant replays that are literally instant, where like a second later we're seeing everything in crystal clear HD, 4K. Every little grain of sand in the dirt is visible. It's an amazing piece of technology that we have at our fingertips in our homes now, and it makes it a lot easier for us to criticize just how bad umpires are. And I wonder, and I think I might have wondered this before, but I wonder if umpires were always this bad and we just never noticed because we didn't have the technology to notice it in the past. Like when I was a kid, I remember watching games, and umpires would blow calls and there'd be arguments and stuff, but we would never really know at home for ourselves. We could never really judge for ourselves what the hell was going on. And so, the crux of it is just that, umpires now are under more scrutiny from fans and from from Major League Baseball, because they get to see the same things as well in high-def replay. So that's my comment on the umpiring situation. It was awful in the World Series, and it needs to get better. And I think umpires need to be held a little bit more accountable for their mistakes. As for the World Series itself, a couple of interesting things that I thought of in watching the Nationals close it out last night at the last minute, again, coming back. This reminded me a lot of the way the Mets lost the 2015 World Series, where they pretty much had a lead in every single game, and it seemed like the Astros were leading more often than they were trailing in this series. But the Nationals just came back at the right time and got timely hits, and they were the better team. They were the better team over the course of this 7-game series. The problem I have with it is that they seemed to, particularly last night, they seemed to get very lucky with batting with balls in play, while the Astros were really pounding the ball off of Max Scherzer and crushing it, but weren't getting the balls to fall in. They were just hit right at everybody. And it happens. It's baseball, but has to be frustrating for the Astros. 107-win season and you don't win the World Series. Heavily favored to win the World Series and you don't win the World Series. You lose to the wild card team that in 5 different occasions, or on 5 different occasions, had their backs against the walls in elimination games and went 5-0 in them. That's a pretty incredible statistic, really. I mean, the Nats deserve a lot of credit. They fought really hard. They battled, and they're the world champs. I don't have to like it. I don't like it, but it is what it is. I have to acknowledge it, and kudos to the Nats. It'll be fun watching them get their hoist their stupid banner and flag and whatever, and get their rings and stuff on opening day next year when the Mets are in DC. Hooray! But let that act as a motivator, perhaps, for the Mets to get where the Nats are. I don't know. A couple of other things from the game last night. Juan Soto. I need to comment on Juan Soto. There was a tweet last night, and I can't remember her name, and I'll try to find it. But we were talking about Soto, and I acknowledge that Juan Soto is an extremely talented young player. I mean, his knowledge of the strike zone is ridiculous. I mean, it really is phenomenally ridiculous. That being said, he's extremely brash. He's extremely cocky, and I dare I say it, he's extremely disrespectful. There are a number of other instances of young players, 21 years old, 20 years old, who didn't lack the humility, rather, that Soto lacks. And I'm referring specifically to the terribly blown call on a clear strike that Soto spit on, and when called a ball, he did his stupid little shuffle, and then he stuck his tongue out at Greinke. And I mean, I guess it's all in fun, and this is like crotchety old baseball guy coming out, I guess, but it really irks me that Soto's able to get away with that. And I have a feeling that, I mean, everyone was watching this. I have a feeling that he's going to take a couple in the back in next season, because what he did was unacceptable in my opinion. Still, he's incredibly talented, and I wish to Christ that he was on the Mets. Speaking of the Mets, since that's what this show is supposed to be about, AJ Hinch did not have a great game last night. He made some blunders. One blunder I will not get on him about, because I typically get on managers for bringing in starting pitchers in the World Series or in the playoffs. He didn't bring in Garrett Cole last night. He stuck with his bullpen guys, and that'd be clearly backfired. You can say that I'm wrong on that, and you're clearly right, looking back at it, hindsight being 20/20. But I've said this before. Bullpen guys are there all season long. They're getting the big outs all season long. Starters start. They don't come in out of the bullpen. So asking them to do something totally different than they've done all season, 162 games, is asking for trouble, in my opinion. That being said, looking back at it, perhaps the smart move would have been to go to Greinke. Go to Garrett Cole in relief of Greinke. Perhaps the other smart thing would have been to not remove Greinke at all, because he was only at 80 pitches, and he had given up a home run to Rendon, yes, but seeing what the Nationals had done over the last few games, and seeing how Greinke had really just kept them on the off balance the whole game. It should have been Greinke finishing that game or staying in that game last night. But I bring up AJ Hinch because I had a theory that maybe it's possible that this bombshell candidate is AJ Hinch. It is. I'm not the first person to say it, obviously, but maybe this whole second round, third round interview stretching nonsense was just to get past the World Series so that the Mets could interview AJ Hinch. And if that's the case, his performance in last night's game, very on brand for the Mets. So I would not be completely surprised if his name creeps up today, frankly, or tomorrow, as having been interviewed by the Mets as a potential managerial candidate. And that's sort of where I'm going to leave us today, since, again, we're sort of turning back to the Mets. In the next few days, the Mets should have a clearer picture of what the managerial situation looks like, and I'll be back then. I'm not going to come back until the Mets have made a decision on who their next manager is going to be. There's no point, not a whole lot to talk about. I hope it doesn't stretch out to past the awards season, because I want to be able to come back and talk about Pete and Jake winning their respective awards for their individual performances in 2019. So hopefully by then the Mets will have their manager in place, and we'll talk more about it at that time. But whenever that might be, later this week or early next, hopefully, I'll be back then to chat about it. And until then, I thank you for watching. It's been fun this season. Baseball is over. I'm going to be starting my day by setting my Google Chrome browser start page to springtrainingcountdown.com so that I can track the number of minutes and seconds that it's going to take for baseball to come back, because I miss it already. So until we chat again, thanks again. Follow me on Twitter at Mr_Met. And as always, let's go Mets.